History will not be able to ever fully capture what this place was all about. History will record Silicon Valley as being this incredible burst of commercial activity where out of nowhere this turbulence suddenly erupted in the chaos that was throwing out enormous wealth and creating these remarkable new products that changed the world. And it just built up to a crescendo, and then it just stopped. And the echoes just go out into time. And people looking back are going to say, what the hell happened there? What was going on? And they'll never be able to understand.
Silicon Valley, 1985. A concentrated mixture of money, human energy, and high technology. The greatest incubator of new companies the world has ever seen. In the middle of the worst recession of its short history, but still growing and considered key to the success of the American economy. Here, one finds the talent, the hard work, the greed, and the possible alienation of a future industrial world. Workers in bunny suits take air showers to prevent contamination to microelectronic parts with dirt from their bodies. Engineers work 16-hour days. Undocumented immigrants from Mexico continue to arrive. Sights one would expect in the streets of large cities in Southeast Asia. Dreams of gold of businessmen in three-piece suits. They all come together to try and make real their own version of the American dream. A dream of knowledge. A dream of wealth. Or simple survival. Filled with dreams, but not a dreamland. Hard work is the business of the valley. The common language that unites the characters in the story. The engineers, pushing the frontiers of the possible. The entrepreneurs, new heroes of American business. The workers, builders of products of the high-tech revolution. And the immigrants, attracted by images of the good life. All of them, the powerful and the powerless, meet at the companies. And products are born, sometimes useful, sometimes just marketable. In the companies, one finds much of the meaning of Silicon Valley. This is a semiconductor wafer going through one of its many production steps at a San Jose-based company. Each wafer contains many little squares, integrated circuits, also known as electronic chips, the heart and soul of any computer. Almost 1/3 of all U.S. manufactured chips come from here. But it is the area's reputation as a major electronics innovator that has given it a fame way beyond its productivity alone. Kings and queens have visited, cities and countries have sent delegations, and left with the goal of becoming the next Silicon Valley. Yet it is a remarkably small place, barely 20 miles by 10, lying at the southern end of the San Francisco Bay. Less than 1.5 million people live here, in about a dozen cities that blend one with the other. Home to 2,000 or 3,000 high-tech companies starting and failing with incredible speed. A place of frenzy, it's become a symbol of the high-tech era. And even if its industrial boom fades rapidly, here the old world clashed with the mythical future. The cowboy met the clean one, and the orchard became the industrial park. Change can't be avoided. Can we learn to control it so it doesn't leave us behind? Will the valley fulfill its benevolent promise or grow forever unbalanced? For now, we can begin by hearing the stories of people of the valley. Throughout these programs on Silicon Valley, we will hear comments and interpretations from Michael Malone, a highly regarded business journalist who grew up in the area. He's the author of The Big Score, the billion-dollar story of Silicon Valley, and has also worked as an investigative reporter.
Okay, you've got a poly resistor on this one, isn't it? Yeah.
Engineers get kind of a bad rap in this town. There's been a stereotype developed about engineers, you know, the man with the calculator on his hip and the pocket full of pens and the tape on the glasses on the bridge of the nose and that sort of thing. And it's really not true. Though, as I say that, I run into the stereotype 3 or 4 times a day. So, but the reality is engineers come in every shape and form. And the reality is that they have a certain point of view. They have a frame of mind. They operate in a very pragmatic, empirical sort of way. You need engineers to build electronic products. You can't have a room full of artists. They may come up with the idea, but someone's got to turn it into the real thing.
You can be an engineer the rest of your life, and that's totally accepted here. And boy, I like that, because engineering and designing clever circuits was my thing in life. You know, I was sort of a totally technical person, a little bit of a technical nerd back in high school. And boy, that was so important. And I didn't have to feel I had to be some corporate guy who knew all the executive words and how to twist stories and sell people things. All I had to do was be able to design circuits that did what they were supposed to do.
Steve Wozniak is a Valley engineer of mythical stature. He has enjoyed in full measure the rewards of having invented, along with Steve Jobs, the first Apple computers. But it all started out not for money, but for love. At age 13, he had found what he wanted in life.
Mathematics is pure, and there's a circle. Somehow you figure out, you work and work and work on paper, and somehow in the end, everything converged on a goal. It spins out looking for roots to get there, and it converged on a goal. And it just, there's something rewarding to your head. It's an intrinsic motivation. It's a, you're rewarded internally. You didn't somehow necessarily get paid for finding that clever solution. And it spurs you on, especially when you're young, to go and look out to see if it stretches any further and there's more tricks, and you can talk to other people about this trick you found and show off, and particularly the unknowns. Hitting people up with something they didn't believe it could be that simple or that it was even possible. And Blue Boxes is very much, pranksters are very much a large part of the creative engineers of Silicon Valley.
During the early 70s, his fascination with technical challenges led him to build telephone blue boxes, allowing him to make long-distance calls without being charged for them.
It was incredible fun. There's an intrigue, there's a magic. When for some reason you know a little technical trick, maybe you read it in a magazine, you dug up some literature, you got it passed word on from others, you can send weird tones over the phone system and divert calls all over the world and make them. It's something nobody believes was really in there. You're doing something you're not supposed to be able to do. It's a little like copying computer software. There's a challenge, and somehow overcoming it is the only game.
Didn't you try to call the Pope once? Didn't I hear a story?
Oh, I called the Pope. Oh, you betcha, you betcha. I said I was Henry Kissinger. I called the Pope. I got after hours of calls through, you know, I went to Italy inward, I went to Rome, I got to the Vatican, I talked to key people, they woke the Pope up, they put on the guy who was going to be the translator, and he said, "You're not Henry Kissinger." And I said, "No, I'm not."
Despite the party mood, engineering is taken seriously here. Just outside Silicon Valley, this is Semicon West 1985, the largest trade show in the world for manufacturers of machinery to build electronic chips. Here you find old-fashioned selling techniques.
We have to advertise it.
And much heavy technical talk.
Also on our epoxy cup, we have an adjustable wiper blade with a micrometer setting. Etching an argon ion beam, which comes in at a few hundred volts.
In this show, the real stars are not the machines, but the engineers. The companies cater to them and hope they'll recommend the newest and the latest.
Well, the average is maybe $300,000.
$300,000?
We think it's cheap at that price.
So this is very important. It shows off the flexibility of the system.
Silicon Valley eats engineers with the appetite of a huge farming combine.
Okay, the test vector generator we're showing with this
It takes them right out of school when they're willing to work 90 hours a week, driven by a sense of mission. So there's a lot of burnout at a relatively young
And
age.
what we have
Still, it's a place where engineers can feel as if they're making a contribution, and the product of their labor will affect other people's lives like the personal computer did. These days, the most esoteric and complex engineering jobs in the electronics world are in the design of the chips themselves. Every semiconductor firm in the valley has rooms such as this one, where engineers and designers study chip designs. This is IMP, a 4-year-old chip house.
8 or 10 mils.
Dick Stallkamp acts as a team leader during a day of discussions on an ongoing project.
10% of the area of the chip.
In some ways, I look at engineering as
Another protection device.
almost a game.
The issue then is if you...
It's kind of an ego thing about knowing. There's certain phenomena that you don't know exactly how they work, and you want to know why. And it's kind of like you against the physical world in a sense. And you try to muster all the various talents that you have to solve a problem.
The one right here in front, this has a nice corner, and that's nice and neat. But the one where you're looking over here, it's got the problem of we've moved these pads in. We've moved these pads in. And so how do you get the VSS and VDD around the corner automatically?
Of the 5 people in this meeting, only 1 is from California, 2 are from England, 1 from Taiwan, and 1 from Ohio, all together because of their expertise. A chip design in front of a group of engineers is like a painting in front of art critics. This is an older design, and before long, they notice its weaknesses.
This wasn't done real well. These had the wrong, well, this is an early chip, very early.
Customer had a time constraint as well.
They want to
Yeah,
collect
came
it.
really
Okay.
quickly.
Because all this could have been squeezed down and had fewer rows.
There were some critical speed paths in there. Which,
For top valley engineers,
for the amount
it's
of time
important
that I
to
had
feel
waste,
like they're making a
he was able to
contribution,
place the
advancing human knowledge.
shells on top of
It's
each
not
other.
always possible, and there's always the engineer who thinks it could have been done better.
I don't think the point was to criticize this job. I think we met the customer's need. The point is...
Engineering is a pinnacle of manual labor. Nuts and bolts pragmatism blended with abstract thinking and creativity. Becoming known for one's mind power is a seductive drug. If the work is exciting, the engineer may end up sacrificing much of his personal life.
I think the only other issues are probably a separate meeting, and that is looking over the ESD and Landship again.
I tend to be workaholic. I tend to be very involved in what I do. And for good or bad, there's an awful lot of things to do. And you find out you can't get them done in 40 hours. I've been here as much as put in a full 80 hours, which is kind of a grind, actually. And it gets to be, I think a lot of people have worked weekends where I've put in 18 hours on a Saturday. And that's a long day, especially if you come up and do it again another 12 hours the next day. It has its problems, though, with personal life. You know, I said I moved out here and didn't know anybody. How do you meet people when you're working many, many hours?
Steve Wozniak, too, admits the long hours are just part of the process.
I do have my hands on. I do sit down here and I modify the wires on the breadboard and torment at 3 a.m. in the morning trying to figure out what I've got to change to make the final last fix that'll make it work.
His obsessive work patterns date back to the mid-70s. While working at Hewlett-Packard, he designed a small computer in his spare time. He wanted it to play games with, but his friend Steve Jobs had other plans.
And then eventually Steve Jobs kept talking to me about it, and he was intrigued by, yes, you could have a microprocessor someday, you could even have a floppy disk and have a time-sharing system perhaps. And he wanted to start selling products. He had a background in local surplus parts component sales. He had been a salesman for some of those stores. And he knew how to buy transistors for 30 cents and sell them for $6. And boy, he wanted to start selling some PC boards for $40, and was the big drive in putting together a business.
It was the ideal partnership, a common one in the valley, the brilliant engineer and the ambitious entrepreneur. They thought they would simply break even until an electronics retailer who used to have a shop right here ordered $50,000 of their computers.
That was the start of Apple I, but we weren't yet a real company. We were just a little, let's work in the garage, we're kind of having fun, we're a club, we're a game. I had a full-time job at Hewlett-Packard, and Steve lived with his parents and worked on it all. It's not like we needed an income, so we didn't pay ourselves. It was later when we came up with the Apple II, and it looked like it was going to be an outstanding product. Too many things had gone so perfectly about it. It was so beautiful that we thought we could sell 1,000 of them. The trouble is, to make 1,000 of them was going to cost $250,000. And we've still got nothing, okay? I don't own a house, I don't own a car, I don't have any assets, Steve doesn't have any. I have to pay cash at my apartments because my checks bounce.
They succeeded in raising the money, largely because of the risk-taking atmosphere of the valley. 5 years later, the company began selling stock, or went public.
Steve and I could look at each other and realize we were worth millions on paper, after a couple years. And it was just a shocking success. And then it kept going up from there. And eventually, the company's going to go public, and Steve and I are each worth, $100 million or so, and it's a little bit shocking. I mean, it's rare, a rare success.
In the summer of 1985, Stephen Jobs went through a sour parting with the management of Apple. He was asked to resign by the president he had once chosen to run the company. The incident left a rotten taste to what had been for Jobs a sweet success story. Curiously, one can read the change in the company into the Apple Museum in Cupertino. There, besides the first antique apples, is written the short history of Apple Computer. It only runs till 1984, and there is no space left for the future. It's almost as if with the exit of the company's founders, Apple became just one more corporation, and the fantastic history of a small entrepreneurial firm stops there. But their success helped bring back the term entrepreneur.
The fact is, entrepreneurs design the world. They design the future, and they do it from nothing. I mean, it's the most spectacular thing. They start with an idea, and 4 or 5 years later, they have a company and a product that no one had ever thought of before that changes the way we live. And on top of that, they can create employment for 5, 10, 25,000 people. It's a spectacular thing. It takes a very unusual person to be an entrepreneur, and it takes a very special environment. And when you have the combination of the two, the world is turned on its head.
People like symbols, and I think to some extent Apple and myself are a symbol for something. And to the extent that we're a symbol for that type of a spirit, that indeed you really can create something which can change the world a little bit, hopefully for the better, that's really nice. And remember that I was 20, just turned 21 when Apple started, and Woz was 24, 25. So we hadn't really had too much experience in business. We had no experience in business, and we certainly were not what you'd call sophisticated in the ways of the world by any means. And I think it's true that we did stumble. Stumble's a funny word, but sort of intuitively stumble into this space of technology where we could actually make a computer on a board the size of a piece of paper.
Steve Jobs is probably the closest thing to a rock star that the business world has ever seen. In his opinion, his unconventional youth helped him quite a bit.
Non-traditional experiences have helped greatly in doing the things that I've tried to do in the last 10 years. So I think part of being creative is just is following your heart into those kinds of experiences that are not on the program track of having a career, hitchhiking around the country, or bicycling across Canada, or heading off to the Himalayas, or going to sit in a monastery in Kyoto. Those kinds of experiences give one a certain sense of self-confidence that's required in business.
Among the thousands of companies born in the valley in one short decade, Tandem Computers could stand as an embodiment of the best that's created here. Innovative technology and seasoned business skill have built a story of success and, in valley terms, longevity. 12 years and still going strong. An example of what well-focused entrepreneurialism can accomplish here.
An entrepreneur is someone that has this idea, mainly that they've come by listening, even though most entrepreneurs talk a lot as well. And so they believe this is the right idea, and they're extremely persistent. They would do anything to prove that the idea is right. And I think that they're not necessarily more smart or see something different. If you have an idea and you're 2 years early, then you're a failure. You're not an entrepreneur. And if you're 2 years late, you're a failure, and you weren't much of an entrepreneur. So it's really those two things.
Tandem was started in 1974 by James Treibig and a group of ex-Hewlett-Packard employees determined to try it on their own. Their idea was to build a computer for business and industrial use that would never break down. The technical trick was to duplicate the central processor. If one failed, the other switched automatically into use. A Texas engineer turned businessman, James Treibig was the spark plug of the team.
Not much turnover around here.
No, we've been very good. We haven't had one of the first 13 patent holders leave to compete against us, and we've only lost 2. So we're pretty proud of that.
The fact that 13 of the original team members are still with Tandem is abnormal in the valley, since top-notch engineers are notorious for jumping from one company to the other. Part of the credit goes to Jimmy T, as he is known by his employees.
I don't know anyone that grew up not trusting people. So I don't know, what can I say? I mean, there's some people you didn't trust, but your normal mode was to trust people you knew, wasn't it?
Tandem's people-oriented management style worked. In only 10 years, it became a Fortune 500 company, competing successfully against none other than IBM.
We've had very difficult competition from the very first day because we've always competed against IBM. And IBM never lets up even if you're really small. Some of the major media said there'd never be another computer company, ever. And in fact, the pictures in 1974 showed a shark, which was IBM, swimming along, eating the other computer companies. So in 1974, there weren't going to be any more companies. There weren't going to be, no one was going to survive against IBM. And this comes and goes.
Tandem and Apple are just 2 of the many successful companies that have been started by entrepreneurs in the valley. They provide employment for thousands of people, and they were built around a technical innovation or a clever design. The lure of the rewards inspires others to jump into the game, but there's only so many innovations at one time, and even fewer good ones, so the risk is great.
They give computers to people to take over, engineers.
3 industry veterans are launching a company. They are not developing or building a product, but selling other people's products at a cheaper price. For them, it's a marketing game. In the center, William Altieri, a marketing consultant. On the left, Don Fluken, whose last major position was Chief Financial Officer for MicroPro. Rich Zalen owns an accounting firm and met Fluken while working at MicroPro.
I thought you'd like to know what we've been doing in our financing. I think we're over the hump. Great. We had our meeting today with a gentleman from Rome. Well, the meeting went along so smoothly. I want to tell you, he started off the meeting by saying, look, guys, we set the modem on the table in front of him. He said, would you like to look at it? And he said, yeah, I'd really kind of like to look at it, but I want to tell you right now that I'm not interested in modems. We at Rome have our own phone system that has its own switches and its own everything. We don't need modems.
No, sir.
And he ended the meeting by saying I could use a couple of thousand of those modems to send to the computers that we give people to take home. He said, do you think you could give me pricing on that in 2 weeks?
Not only that, he took a business plan.
Not only that, he took a business plan and said he'd like to become an investor.
Wow.
And he's going to buy our cabling, and he's looking at some other things. So he's sold.
Dominoes.
It's Dominoes. That's a good-looking modem.
Right, so
he took one look at this and he said, that's a solid modem. And we told him how it tested and everything.
I thought he didn't look at
It's a
it.
commodity.
like I've been trying to tell you.
It's a commodity. He looked at it, he said, that's solid.
You know, it's amazing how little the raising of money has to do with the actual running of the business.
But how much time it takes.
And how much time it takes. It's getting kind of old.
So with that, unless you have questions on the financing, let's move on to packaging. Bill, let me write them down. You're the marketing guy. What do you want to do with your box? Thing that struck me, I don't know, this TM looks awfully large to me.
Well, that's because everything's too big there, yeah.
If they shrink this down, the TM shrunk proportionally, you think it'll be okay?
Yeah, that'll be all right.
It's hardly a work of art, but I like it.
It's gutsy, you know.
Oh, I guess one thing's for certain. If any of these units ever find themselves on retail shelves, it'll stick out like a sore thumb among all those tasteful blues that kind of wash into the
Everybody's
background.
copying Big Brown, you know. Look at these. Like they're just copying IBM Blue. That's all they're doing.
The computer world is blue.
There's just shades of IBM.
No, blue.
That's all they're doing. That's IBM gray on there. The whole world's that way. We got to do something that's different.
Entrepreneur is such a terrible word. You know, it's businessmen. I mean, we're businessmen. We're not, you know, we're not techno nerds. We're not marketing gurus. We're not super salesmen. None of us are. You know, we're businessmen. We know what it takes to put something like this together. I, for one, have no illusions about getting extremely rich, or at least I can't allow myself those kinds of illusions anymore. I've been through it too often.
Oh, come on. Just a little before. Just a tiny bit.
Well, having the freedom to set a company policy, as Rick said, based on our own set of morals and values, and provide a good place for people to work, and then you look at it and say, well, the 80 or 90 hours is probably worth it in the rewards that you get at the other end of that.
If entrepreneurs weren't invented in Silicon Valley, they should have been, or at least in California. They continue the tradition of the gold prospector, investing their lives following a dream. They are risk takers, strong individualists with tremendous work habits and a hard-edged competitive drive. Their huge ego will keep them going when others prefer the safety of the pack. Many times, newcomers to the Valley expect only a job with a company. Before they know it, they've been lured by the possible rewards of starting on their own.
If it's wildly successful, I could be making $500,000 a year very easily.
Bob Grossman came from Boston 8 years ago to work as an engineer in Silicon Valley. He is starting a company to publish a reference magazine for the electronics industry. To do this, he gave up a job that paid him $70,000 a year.
The reason to have a lot of money is so you don't have to associate with people you don't want to. You want to be able to do business with just people that are pleasant. You don't want to have to do business with the guy you don't like, or the guy who's, you know, his idea of business is to beat you up. And having money and being successful gives you the option of doing that. If you're not, if you're scrambling, you just can't take that option. Electronic synopsis, Bob Grossman. When you tell your family you're quitting your job, the first thing they do is, oh my God, and then you tell them you're starting your own company, and you know, all of a sudden, they know somebody who's starting their own company, and I mean, we all have fancy titles. There's 3 of us, and my card reads President. One of my other partners is Vice President, Finance and Administration. The 3rd guy is Vice President of the magazine division. I mean, we have 1 magazine, but he's Vice President of the magazine division. Because you gotta think big, you gotta think long term, you gotta think about things like that. If, you know, if all I think about is, this is my 1 magazine and that's it, then that's all I'll ever have. Yes, we're all realistic to know this one has to work before you get to number 2. It's great to have a 5-year plan, but if you go bankrupt in year 3, you're, you know, dead. The titles are fun. It's all a lot of fun. I call somebody up, well, this is the president of this, you know, of Grossman and Twaddell Publishing. That just turns them right on. Turns me on a bit. But I'm still here typing my own letters, licking my own stamps, and doing all the detail work, the dog work that needs to be done. That's what's going to make it a success, not saying, well, I'm above that. You can't ever be above that. Because if you fail, who remembers you? Who remembers who came in second? Who remembers who didn't make it? They only remember the winner. I'm very disappointed that it didn't work. It was an absolutely brilliant failure. Everybody's got an idea that they think is going to make them a millionaire, you know, and rich and famous and start this big new company. And most of us never get to do it. I got to try it and didn't quite make it. And here I am today.
Bob Grossman got a high-paying job as director of marketing at a fast-growing computer-aided design firm. For Don Fluken at his modem marketing company, it could be over any day, but he's still desperately trying to make his idea work. Along the way, his two partners lost faith and pulled out.
It's been a lot tougher than I thought. Thought everybody would see the brilliance of my idea immediately. If we can't get confirmation from the market that this idea works within, you know, 2 or 3 month period, we're going to run out of money, and that's when you fold up your tent and go home. Right now, it looks like that isn't the case. And of course, I guess you wouldn't do this if you weren't optimistic, so I'm always optimistic that we're going to do it.
Workers in Silicon Valley have the same dreams as assembly line workers anywhere. They want a good job, they want security, and they want a comfortable way of life. Unfortunately, there's a lot of factors working against that. These are truly the migrant workers of the electronics industry, the assembly line people. This valley isn't their career. Few of them dream of ever making a big score. It's a job. They hope it lasts through the next recession. If it doesn't, they move on.
One out of every 4 employed people in the valley works for the electronics industry. Engineers and entrepreneurs receive most of the attention, but there has to be someone to actually build what the engineers design. High tech doesn't always mean high pay. Electronic production workers are paid 2/3 as much as the United States' highest industrial rates in oil, steel, and automobile production. The Pacific Studies Center is a small research group in Mountain View. Longtime observer of the valley, Lenny Siegel, is its director. He has just co-authored the book, The High Cost of High Tech.
The most significant problem that I see in Silicon Valley is that we are not all wealthy professionals doing exciting work. It is basically a land of two populations. On the one hand, there are the well-known yuppie professionals, the engineers and computer scientists and managers who are earning good money and are doing exciting work here. This is what everybody thinks about when they think about Silicon Valley. But equally important to the valley are the production workers and the service workers in the area who don't earn enough to survive in the valley, particularly because of the high cost of living, are stuck on the freeway for an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening going to and from work. If they have kids, the child care is inadequate, too expensive. Basically, they are doing the work to make the valley possible, but are not reaping any of the rewards, or very few of the rewards.
In the mid-'80s, hourly wages for the electronics industry range from $4 for entry-level jobs to $13 for higher-skilled type of work. The average is close to $9 per hour.
I make about $1,200 a month.
Is that good to live here?
Yeah, it's not really capable of. No, yeah, I couldn't live by my own.
No, not really. I'd have to really skim.
So how do you do it?
Right now I'm living with my parents, so that's the way I can really live right now.
What's your goal?
My goal is management.
Even though high-tech is a new industry, the traditional roles of men and women in the workplace haven't changed. Women are more often found on the factory floor than in higher positions within the company.
I really don't know why there's more women than men. Maybe that women have more patience than men to do this work. Yeah, that's what they can think of, but there's more women.
I don't think men like being on an assembly line as much. You know, they like the more money-making jobs.
Wait, this is not good money?
Oh yeah, it is. I think for a woman, not for a man, unless you're like maybe into maintenance or some engineering, something like that. But being an operator, it's fair.
If there is an abundance of women in production, it is the opposite in the technical occupations. Of every 100 high-tech engineers, 95 are men. Mary Chow was born in Taiwan and went to college in Southern California. She works closely with engineers as a computer-aided designer.
Sometimes I forget about the fact that I'm a woman. Working here, they're like brothers to me. Technical ability is what they're looking for. They're really result-oriented. They'll see how productive you are with the job assigned to you. What's your ability to solve the problems or to prevent the problems from beginning, rather than how well you speak or how well you present yourself. We can say the post-process of the placement or pre-process of the hookup. And the second part is actually the Shanka hookup.
Mary Chow's professional standing is uncommon in this male-dominated field. Even when women do better than men in high school and college science, they drop out at a higher rate and are more likely to exclude themselves from higher-level science and math training.
When I first decided going into mathematics, I heard that a lot. Most of my classmates were boys at that time, and there were only very few girls in my class. But my mother was in mathematics as well, so I don't have the feelings that it's a strange field or something. I felt that I was born with that kind of, you can call it talent, but I call it maybe attitude. So it doesn't bother me. When people say that, I say, well, that's how they feel, fine. I have my own feelings.
One of the unfortunate realities of the high-tech assembly line is the monotony, something that can be found at any assembly line in any type of industry.
How'd you feel when you first got there? Were you surprised by what it was?
I was very surprised when I first got there because I thought, electronics was going to be something exciting. It was really boring, and it was monotonous, sitting there for 6 hours, putting one part in at a time and testing it. It got to be really boring.
I thought testing parts was going to be this very important job that you had to do just perfect. And I was in the department a very short time when I realized that it wasn't that important. It wasn't really, we weren't really doing that great of a job. I had a specialist who showed me how to test the parts that I've never even seen before. And all she told me was, well, if this looks good, let it go. And if this light comes on, reject it. So I really didn't know what I was testing. I just went ahead and did what she told me to do and followed it.
Throughout the electronics industry here, a third or more of all production workers are members of minority groups, with the highest percentages in the lower-paying jobs. For example, they make up 1 in 6 of the engineers or managers, but more than half of the service workers.
Filipinos, Vietnamese, Chinese, and Mexican workers. This comprises the majority of the working force in the company. But then again, insofar as supervisor's position is concerned, these are jobs for the whites.
On my group, I have a mixture.
You have what?
A mixture, you know, people from all different countries.
India,
You know?
Portuguese, American, and what else? Mexican, of course, China.
They're all good people.
But the more it's Portuguese, we have four of us. Yeah.
It's quite a mix.
It's not because I'm Portuguese.
Like four of them without.
These two women work for SEEK, a San Jose semiconductor firm. They are both from Portugal and have been in this country for more than 10 years. Maria Diaz Christians is a supervisor.
The reason they're here is because they are good people. They are outstanding operators. It doesn't matter where they came from. It doesn't matter.
But with her, we speak English because we understand she's our supervisor, and the other people, they don't know our language, so we have to speak with her in English. Because then they're gonna think we're speaking something else. So, but with my friends, we speak our language.
That's a policy that I made.
Yeah. I don't want to go back to my country.
What?
I don't want to go back to my country.
Why?
Why? Because over here we have more opportunities to work and, have more fun.
Off the mainstream of the valley, a hidden population of anywhere between 20 and 60,000 undocumented immigrants lead invisible lives. Unseen, despite their everywhereness, the gardeners, busboys, and janitors, most of them from Mexico. At this factory in 1982, immigration officers arrested 44 workers, all from Mexico, and in this country illegally. They were the major part of the workforce, paid the minimum wage for assembling coaxial cable. Workplace raids were stopped by judicial order in 1985. Most companies are tightening documentation requirements. Still, many will come, no matter what kind of work is available.
How's it going? Like in this song, undoubtedly very bad. Why? Lack of work, lack of preparation. Why did you come here? I believe everybody comes searching a better life. But we didn't think of the future. I think my country, Mexico, is much better than here, right? And now, how do we go back? What did you think you'd find here? We thought we'd come to sweep dollars. Just work. We thought we'd find work. Cheer up, partner. Cheer up. Don't let down. Did you know that they build computers here?
No.
In the middle of the valley, yet so far removed, they don't even know the main source of economic activity, the electronics industry. All they hope for is a job. They don't know anybody and have nowhere to stay. A step ahead of immigration agents without papers. They receive lower wages because they will not complain. Even though their life in the valley is hard, many times it's better than what they left. Over 20% of the valley's population is of Hispanic origin. If current trends continue, many of them will be frozen out of Silicon Valley's changing job market unless the quality of their education improves. Jobs in electronics are not the only ones here, but without a proper education, horizons are limited. And while the wages of a bread maker are enough for a new motorcycle, chances for advancement are few and far between. Third world immigrants in the valley may experience feelings of loneliness and confusion. The merry-go-round of the past and its memories are safe, but they block the chance to break away and develop. The numerous choices of lifestyle suddenly available can be intimidating.
Is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the West Fall.
During the last 10 years, Indo-Chinese refugees and immigrants have been arriving steadily, and the valley now has the second largest number of them in the United States. Many of the early Vietnamese refugees had a high level of education prior to arriving here, and have used the financial help provided by the state and federal governments as a base to get on their feet. Ethnic businesses have flourished in places like downtown San Jose, and a new cultural tradition has started. The older generation, as in other immigrant groups, tries to live as if still back home. But for the young, assimilation is well underway.
She's a very, very good student, and we expect him she get a job after she graduates, which is going to be around June or July. She's doing an excellent job.
A drafting class at a federally funded school in downtown San Jose. The majority of the students are Vietnamese. Victor Tang, one of the boat people, arrived in 1980 after 18 months in a refugee camp in Thailand.
I have to learn, and I start again to get into my my job field and to find a job, and I start my new life.
Away from home, away from home, away from home, away from home. Love and kind, undressed mind, away from home. Got no shirt on my back.
Some people have called Silicon Valley Company Town, but I don't think it is. I think what you've seen in Silicon Valley among the more responsible companies is a recognition that the job is the absolute center of the worker's life. And the companies who have recognized this and recognized their responsibility have sort of stepped into the breach in supplying all the other things of daily life while on the job. The gym and the doctors and the hot tubs and the beer parties and the social gatherings and all these things that used to be taken care of by the community are now being taken care of by the better companies. There's a good reason for that, because Silicon Valley is basically one very large company. There's not a lot of community. The community lies in the job.
While there isn't much sense of community in the valley, all of the material things that have characterized the middle-class version of the American dream are here. Attractive suburban houses, backyard barbecues, high school football, little league games, trips to the beach or to ski, the Sunday washing of the car. With the exception of pockets of poverty or extreme wealth, the whole valley looks and feels like any other suburb in America in its California version. People here tend to be above the U.S. average in education, income, consumption of wine, and in their fondness for outdoor activities, and below the national average in age, marital stability, and in their purchases of American cars. What marks the area, though, is its lack of a solid identity because of its young age as a major urban center. Individual identity for those of working age lies at the company. For the lucky ones, a steady job with one of the better companies in the valley brings many rewards besides a regular paycheck.
They just make it where you're glad to go to work. It's a fun thing to do. They make it exciting to work here.
Following the lead set by IBM and Hewlett-Packard on treatment of employees, companies such as Rome, Tandem, AMD, and others have developed a unique style of management. To be successful, they must constantly increase their productivity. One approach is to find new ways to keep employees motivated. Its clearest expression can be seen at Tandem in James Treibig's philosophy on employee stock ownership.
If you make people owners in a company through stock, that's socialist. You know, that's a way of the socialism used to think that workers participate, right? So then what destroys it? The worker that doesn't work or do their fair share.
James Treibig's ideas have inspired a company that has a large part of its stock in the hands of its employees and an unusual amount of loyalty among them. Its turnover rate is one of the lowest in the valley. At nearby AMD, employee loyalty is one of Chairman Jerry Sanders' prime concerns.
I want to see if we can raise loyalty level to the point that people say, okay, this company takes care of me, I'm going to take care of it. And when I was a little boy, there was a man on television called Jack Parr. And Jack Parr was very popular, and he seemed to have a lot of friends. I remember Jack Parr said to an interviewer, why do you get along so well with people? Why are you so popular? And he said, I like first. And they said, what do you mean I like first? He said, I go out to the people first and show them I like them. I don't wait for them to come to me and show me they like me. I show them I like them. And that's the way I feel about loyalty. I think if we can show our people that we care about them and we make the effort first, maybe, just maybe, some of them, and in my view, it's been demonstrated, the majority of them will say, hey, this is a good place to work. This is the kind of company I want to identify with.
These are images from Christmas parties sponsored by AMD for their employees. They are extravagant affairs with music by groups like Chicago or Kenny Loggins. Due to hard times, there was no party in 1985. Critics charge that much of the Valley's managerial style is only generous during good times and paternalistic at all times. At a Christmas party in 1982, when things were going well for AMD, Jerry Sanders spoke to his employees and in a few words laid out the basis for his company's philosophy.
What are we all about here at Advanced Micro Devices? We're a noble experiment. We're a company that believes in meritocracy. That means the better job you do, the more promotions you get, the more money you make, the more fun you have, and the better the company is for you. You're great. I offer you my thanks for a wonderful year. You're my family. I love you. Merry Christmas, and God bless you.
Skeptics may doubt Jerry Sanders' commitment to his workforce, but until now, he's fulfilled his promise of not laying off anybody, even during hard times, and it's paid off. AMD is #1 among U.S. corporations on its return to investors, and it has its founder's style. In 1983, AMD rented the Eiffel Tower's restaurant to give a party for its European distributors.
Good. Where am I going? Straight ahead? That's the men's room.
For Jerry Sanders, who came from a working-class family in Chicago and once dreamed of becoming a movie star, the rise to the top has been dramatic. His entrepreneurial success has made him a firm believer in the Silicon Valley version of the American dream.
I never thought I'd ever be sitting here talking to somebody for a television interview as a Fortune 500 company or as one of the guys listed as one of the 50 most influential men in America today. I mean, it's bizarre. So I think that's the great thing about America. You know, there's no limit to what you can do. It's a great place.
The ironies of the Valley could be easily seen one Saturday morning a few years ago. Due to a highly profitable year, AMD decided to hold a lottery for its workers. First prize, $240,000.
Do you know that you just won $240,000?
Oh, yes?
Yes, absolutely.
I love it.
I can't stand it. Oh, fantastic. Could I have a kiss?
The most flamboyant of the Valley's entrepreneurs embraced Jocelyn Geno, 20-year-old worker from the Philippines who had been in this country for less than 2 years. One can interpret this obscure event in many ways. There they were, the two poles, the immigrant assembly line worker and the wealthy entrepreneur, continuing the myth of the easy riches of the valley.